So, what does happiness mean to you? What does it mean to your boss? And how important is it in the workplace? Well, my guest today on the mental space is an expert in happiness, I'm delighted to say. And we're recording on a Friday, so happy Friday. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Louise Lambert, who is the editor of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology.
Yes.
And you are the head of happiness policy, is that correct?
And programming.
And,
yeah.
For Happiness.org,
Yeah.
which you try to work with organizations to teach them the benefits of happiness within their organizations.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
We always start the podcast by asking the question, what does mental health mean to you?
So, I can answer it personally and then professionally. So personally, it's just being well, being able to get up in the morning and go, yeah, life's good. From a mental health perspective, because I also worked as a psychologist for many years, it's two things. It's the absence of mental illness, so absence of depression, anxiety, any of these diagnoses that we might find in the DSM, and the presence of positive emotional experiences. So generally, psychologists just focus on the one. Let's try to help people feel less miserable. And less miserable is also good, but less miserable isn't enough.
Feels like a goal to achieve in the first place.
Let's be less awful.
Let's be less miserable.
And
it's not quite a T-shirt, is it?
No. Although it would be a funny one, you could do like half the T-shirt. And then the other half should say, also, positive emotional experiences, things to get up for in the morning.
A marketing empire begins here.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I interrupted rudely. You were saying, so half of it is the miserable, let's be less miserable.
Be less miserable.
But it is more.
But it's also about the presence of positive emotional experiences, including meaning and purpose and things to strive for and all that good stuff that we want in life.
So it's a Friday.
Yes.
When we're recording this podcast. So I always ask the question as a follow-up, how's your mental health today?
Well, it's a little shaky because I went out last night.
So you haven't observed proper sleep hygiene?
No,
That's what you're saying?
I have not at all.
Yeah.
However, I did balance that out with having a very nice evening, meeting new people. I went to wine tasting.
So some positive, emotional...
and good wine.
Yeah, and good. Great. Why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit of your kind of like Marvel superhero origin story? Like how did you start down this path into psychology? Okay. Why did you choose it? And just tell us a little bit more about the work that you've been doing with the journal, but also with Happiness.org.
Yeah. So my story is a little bit boring, actually. I'm from Northern Canada. There's not a whole lot to do. So when I was going to university, literally there were three options. I could do education, little children kind of like give me anxiety, so that was not good. I could have done finance and economics. I'm terrible in numbers, so that ruled that out. And then there was psychology. I thought, all right, let's do psychology. No, I lie. There was sociology. Okay. I love sociology. But you can't really get a job in sociology. So I let that go, and psychology it was.
Okay.
So I did my psychology degree, bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and it wasn't until I hit my doctorate degree, there was this one little tiny course in positive psychology, and I needed to raise my GPA. So I'm like, this has got to be easy, right? Like positive psych. And I took it, and it just changed everything.
Yeah.
So it was the course I was looking for. So it's what often we think psychology does. It's about the good things in life, again, meaning, purpose, good character, positive emotional experiences. But actually, psychology has not been that for decades, like probably ever. There was little tiny mentions of it, and we just kind of went, oh, that's nice, cute. And then we just kind of forgot about it. Positive psychology really put it back on the table and said, no, actually, this is the other half of psychology. We said we would do 100 years ago. We got sidetracked by World War II, PTSD, mental illness, all the rest. And we need to get back to that. We need to help people get meaning in life. And so that was my first real scientific exposure to positive psychology. I was working in mental health at the time.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of groups in depression for clients, groups in anxiety. And what we noticed, and probably any mental health clinic will tell you the same, people who struggle with depression come back over and over and over again. So depression is hard to get rid of, But it occurred to me, maybe depression is not hard to get rid of. Maybe our tools are just not very good at treating it. So I had a great boss at the time, and she's like, you know what? Let's try a happiness group. I thought, ooh, this will go over like a ton of bricks, but okay, let's try it. So we didn't call it happiness. I forget what we called it, some vague, descriptive name, but it was all the different positive psychology interventions, 6-week program, and we specifically took those hard cases of people who had been with us for years. Yeah. And that really changed my eyes because some of those very same clients who had been with us literally for years, some of them were really angry and said, I've been coming to this specific clinic for, 15, 17, 18 years. I've seen X amount of psychiatrists. Basically, I've been living a miserable life. You come along with your happy, positive psychology interventions, and that's all it took. And thank you, but I'm angry with you. And it really brought home that psychologists have a responsibility not only to reduce misery, but to teach people how to live a good life from a scientific perspective.
Is that changing? I mean, are you seeing positive? I mean, one wonders why positive psychology has been buried or overlooked for so long. And are you seeing that come through? I mean, I went into I had therapy less than a year ago, more from a preventative kind of like a maintenance thing. Yep. And we did a lot of work around compassion therapy. Okay. So it was about teaching self-compassion. Yeah. Which seems positive. I'm not sure if that is positive.
It is under the bucket of positive psychology therapies. It certainly
felt positive, and it was great from a reset perspective. And it was exactly what I needed.
Perfect.
In a really sort of busy time where I wasn't overwhelmed, but I was on the path to getting overwhelmed. So it was a great reset. If it's so valuable, why has it been overlooked for so long? And is that changing now?
I think it's changing a little bit. I think in part we suffer from bad branding. Okay. So at the beginning it was happy faces and happy, and even psychologists were like, what is this? Yeah. So I think we got a bad reputation. Okay. The field also, so there's the psychology.
Happiness got bad
and then
PR.
There's the positive. Okay. Yeah. So the positive part kind of became more popular than the psychology part. And there was a real imbalance for a while. Okay. Over time, we've professionalized the field. We've come back to looking at evidence. We've come back to looking at different interventions and actually testing those in the same way we would test CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, compassion therapy, all of these other things. Yeah. So that has served to legitimize the field. That's one. Two, there's also the understanding of it. So we often get confused with wellness, well-being, positive psychology. All this gets lumped into the same bin.
So define the differences for me.
So how do I do this nicely?
Nicely. Positively.
Positively. No, I think...
Or just tell us exactly what positivity is versus the other two.
Well, positivity is be happy, be positive. And positive psychology actually doesn't say that. Okay. So if you're trying too hard to be happy, there's probably a problem. And also we know that people who try too hard to be happy end up being miserable. So stop that. So the goal is not to be happy 100% of the time. That would mean you're manic and you're not well. That's a mental illness right there. Okay, so that's not the goal. Okay. But the goal is to be able to harness positive emotional experiences and to look at, what are some of the building blocks to well-being, again, from a scientific perspective. That's the psychology piece, the positive psychology piece. Well-being is kind of the broader bucket under which lots of things get put, including positive psychology. Okay. Wellness is a little more outside of that. That would include things like these ice baths, the something method. I don't know. Somebody talked to me about it. Wim Hof. Okay. Okay. Yes. So, okay.
I've done the odd ice bath also. Okay. It's really good. It's good. I wouldn't say it doesn't.
I'm not saying yes or no, but it's not necessarily sustainable over time. And it's not always, not with specific reference to that, but it's not always very scientific. But it's appealing because it's easy, it makes us feel good, it ticks the box. So I kind of take more of the science approach and look at what has evidence and how do we incorporate that and help people adopt some of these strategies.
What fascinates me, though, is that we seem to have this obsession in the minute, and I wonder where you think it's come from, that we must be happy all the time and that we're not happy enough.
I think some of that stems from America. Mm-hmm. So if we look at positive psychology, it did emerge from the US. So it's going to carry a lot of those cultural undertones. And that has been a big criticism within positive psychology. It tends to be very individualistic. It focuses on you, puts the responsibility for being happier on you, but also the assumption that everybody wants to and should be happy. This is also criticized a lot. In other parts of the world, happiness is more collective. Here would be a good example. Happiness is maybe lower intensity, lower valenced, and it's more around meaning and purpose, life satisfaction, instead of, you see these Microsoft ads, you can do it. And people are always jumping in a field. I've never seen this in real life. And I'm like, why is there always people jumping in a field?
I haven't seen many IT specialists jumping in fields.
Especially,
So how do we redress the balance? Because it does feel like we've got this kind of issue. And I think we've got our children obsessed with social media, and we're trying to, our generations are trying to wean ourselves off it with this constant comparison, with this constantly telling us, and obviously we've got advertising telling us we need these material things to feel happy, and if you're not as beautiful as that person over there,
there's something wrong with you.
There's something wrong with you. Like, what are your tactics around that, or what does positive psychology seek to do?
So I think, and this is what I like about positive psychology, there's a number of different models, there's a number of different strategies, and you can, pick different strategies in different buckets. So there's multiple pathways to happiness. Positive emotional experiences are one. These are short, they're not very long lasting, but we need them. Otherwise, life is boring. So a piece of chocolate. My wine tasting last night.
Right? No judgment here.
Yeah, exactly. There's other paths to happiness, though. Another one is engagement. Losing ourselves in activities that we're good at, that bring out the best in us. This could be doing research. This could be work. This could be learning a new sport, a new language. That's a form of happiness right there. Another one might be meaning and purpose. So volunteering, ascribing importance to something bigger than you. So this would also include religion, spiritual beliefs. There's also relationships. We can seek happiness through others, right? So being in service of others, but also being a better person to be able to be of service to others. So it implicates both. So there's a lot of different routes. And really my advice is always what matters to you. How do you want to live your life? Now, we can give you some of that evidence that maybe the positive emotional experiences are important, but they don't go very far. So do those a little bit less, but you do need them. Meaning and purpose are great, but if you only have that, you're going to burn out because that makes for a bit of a boring life. So you might want to combine that with positive emotional experiences. So, the evidence does tell us how to mix and match, but at the end of the day, you're in charge of your life. And if you don't want to do anything, that's okay too.
So we'll start with that then. You're in charge of your life. Because particularly when we look at, and it's a question we've talked about before, when we look at the world of work, that question of personal responsibility versus, an employer's responsibility for our environment. So let's start with our personal responsibility, because there are two schools of thought on this as well, which is one that, we should be taking responsibility for our own, which is absolutely, I kind of totally subscribe to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you just mentioned it just then. It's like, no, but you are totally responsible for everything that happens. And those outside factors, such as your bosses and that environment, you're still responsible for dealing with all of that.
So I think where it differs is once you enter into an agreement where there is some sort of contract. Okay. Work would be one of those. But relationships are also another one of those. Okay. When you get married, you're responsible for your own happiness. But if you're not nice to your partner, he or she can leave. Right? So the minute somebody else is involved, now it becomes a system. Now it becomes a context. We both have a role to play. So this is, what I call the social contract. Yeah. So once you enter a workplace, yes, there are things you can do. You need to go to bed on time. You need to show up with, a modicum of, yay, I'm here, let's do it. Okay, hopefully it's a little better than that. You need to get along with people, you need to be good at what you do, etc. But your organization also has a role to play in constructing a context around you where it is possible to be able to do that. Okay. And these two have to work together. Okay. So if you're doing all the work and your workplace isn't, eventually you're going to hit the end of the road and go, okay, look, just like a marriage, I'm doing all the work, you're not. I think we need to have a conversation here.
So for people to, so the personal responsibility first, what are the pieces of advice or the tools that positive psychology helps, people to take responsibility for their own, let's not say happiness, but for their own positive emotional experiences and all of the metrics that you just talked about?
Yeah, so I think there we look at this from performance, but also job satisfaction. So it could be things like being more optimistic, being more hopeful. One of the strategies is capitalization, so being happy for people instead of being like, I'm jealous, stab you in the back.
You see something on LinkedIn and go, oh, why has he got that job or that promotion or that?
Exactly. Yeah. It could be, building a bit more resilience. So when you have a setback, you don't just crumble and fail, but you're like, okay, I can do this. How do I do this differently? It could be seeking feedback, being able to have good relationships with people and be honest with people so they can be honest with you back to be able to further your personal growth and development. There's also a role for relational well-being, which also depends on us. So this is nurturing others' growth, building trust, giving away trust. It could be removing barriers from people's career trajectories, if you will. So if there's somebody who's kind of stopping somebody else's promotion, that you might want to take on a role of advocacy to try and help that person or make connections, help them with meetings, right? So there's things that we can do for one another as well. So it's really looking at what are the psychosocial assets, if you will, that we bring to the workplace, which help us do that good work. So optimism, resilience, all of these that we've mentioned.
So then if we flip to the other side of the equation and the employers, tell me your view of their responsibility to create an environment where people can thrive.
So we'll start with the big pieces and then we'll come down to the more important ones. So the big pieces, obviously fair pay, right? Clarity in your job role. What is it exactly you are doing? And hopefully there's some stability to that. Some people are on different teams every 3 days and it's just like, what is going on here? Yeah. Also, good relationship with your manager. I think that goes a long way. And in fact, the research would support that. So if we look at what is the biggest driver of employee well-being or the biggest influence, it is actually the manager. So 70% of employee well-being is driven by the manager. So having a good manager is practically all of it. It's essential. Yeah. Not only to well-being, but to good work as well. So relationships, how people are treated. Do we respectfully engage with people? Now that's kind of awkward wording because you're like, respectfully engage. What does this mean? Being nice, being respectful, saying thank you. Do you mind? Could I ask of you, what do you think? What would you do in this situation? We never say these things. And yet these are beautiful ways to show respect. These are beautiful ways to empower people. These are amazing ways to help build people up, to find their strengths and to give them voice, but also to help them feel like they belong, they matter, they're seen, and you want them there. That's crazy talk, I know.
No, I mean, it feels like old school skills that we seem to have lost along the way.
Yeah.
I talk about that respecting the workplace and just being nice. Why have we lost that, do you feel?
I think for a while, and I think of the 80s, the big shoulder pads, and it was all about
power play,
make money, and,
millennials, Gen Zs, look it up. The videos are great.
I know, they're like, yeah, what a joke. But really, I think we got lost along the way. I think you're absolutely right, and it was this pursuit of profit for sure, and I'm not against profit. Companies need to make money to survive. Yeah. I could use a little more as well, but it sometimes has overridden human dignity. and respect.
I was in a conversation about this the other day. It feels, and I don't know, I'd love to get your perspective on this. Like, it feels like Gen Z, in particular the younger generation, are waking up to the lie that we were, my generation, certainly the Gen X and the Boomer, my dad's generation, because they were the first generation that were actively marketed to, like, on TV. Like, advertising just went into overdrive. And in the 80s and 90s, like, everybody was told the acquisition of things, the flash suits, the bigger car, the bigger house, that's what's going to fill the hole in your soul. And how many people got all of that and then went, but it didn't work. And it feels, you see the statistics and the narrative around Gen Z going, they value purpose and meaning as much as a pay packet. Do we fit? Are we gravitating back to that? And
I think we are. So one of the silver linings from COVID is that people just kind of went, "Wow, life is short. I ain't doing this anymore."
Yeah.
And this real need and drive.
That's why I launched the business in the first place.
Well, yeah, like like a lot of us quit our jobs.
Yeah.
So I think there is a shift where people are saying, I don't want to do that anymore, but there's enough people saying it that now people are going, oh, can we say that now? Okay, yeah, me too, please. I'll have what Gen Z is having. And I think it's great that they're saying it because they're saying what nobody else has been able to say.
Now, I think the blockage in the system are people that look like me. The Gen Xers and the Boomers, and who are in the leadership position.
Yeah.
It feels like it's very difficult for them to let go of the ways they were taught.
Yeah.
And I know, I've had conversations where they roll their eyes and go, well, we were miserable, they should be miserable too. I say that a lot on the podcast.
We worked 18 hours a day. Why?
Yeah,
and my response is always, I'm sorry. See, I actually didn't need to.
Yeah. I used to get up before I went to bed. How do we reach leaders then, and how important is, and I know you're very passionate about this, how do we convince leaders that actually the way that we were taught don't work anymore?
It doesn't work. And
I'm not sure it ever worked as well as it should have.
I'm not sure it ever worked. So my dad is 82 or 81. Maybe he's 80. I don't know. He'll correct me after he watches this anyways. But even him and my mom have said, wow, things aren't like they used to. We used to work all the time, and we didn't spend a lot of time with you kids. So I think somewhere there's this realization, a bit of reflection of, did that really work for us? And I'm not sure it did. There's also new research coming out. Deloitte has a number of reports on this from a number of different markets around the world, but showing that senior leaders, CEOs are feeling the stress. And their intentions to quit are just as high, if not higher, than employees.
That's the statistic I saw. That was actually even higher. It was like something like 75%.
70, it was in the 70s.
In the 70%, yeah.
That's massive.
It is, absolutely.
So I would invite leaders to say, yeah, me too, actually. And how do we all build better workplaces so we don't have to, lose our marriages, produce bad relationships with our kids, have a couple of heart attacks along the way? Because frankly, this is no fun, actually, and nobody's having fun here.
I remember working in a newspaper back in England, and we went for, and journalism is one of those burnout professions, 24/7, la, 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 la. And my deputy at the time handed in his notice because him and his partner were going to have a child. And he said, I don't think this is conducive to my work-life balance. So I am at the public house at lunchtime with my editor, my deputy editor, my chief photographer, and myself. And I'm going, can you believe this guy? I don't know. And then we looked around the room and went, divorced, 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 divorced. So.
And sometimes that's the narrative you have to challenge because people are telling you, well, we did it and it was fine. And I'm thinking, you're on your third wife. And okay, sure. So, what? Really?
So through the lens of Happiness.org, I mean, it would be loved that if, all leaders woke up tomorrow and had some Damascene conversion and went, you know what, you're right. And if they didn't have that during COVID, they're probably not going to have that. So if we turn to the business case then, we talk to the evidence. What's the business case? You work with organizations with Happiness.org.
HappinessMatters.
HappinessMatters.
.org. It's okay.
Great Yeah,
That's okay.
absolutely. See the show notes for the link.
Yeah.
But with that work, what is the evidence that you're putting in front of C-suites?
There's a ton of evidence. I mean, let's go back to that 70%.
Yeah.
So if 70% of your leaders want to go, two things happen. One, if they go, it leaves a vacuum in leadership that you now have to replace, costs involved, crisis to the company, et cetera.
Yeah.
But the worst is if they stay. So 70% of people want to go, but they don't actually go. They're sitting there being miserable, unhappy, or just unproductive, or like, yo, I'm going golfing, like whatever. Figure it out, everybody.
Gone fishing, yeah.
You know, so that's at that level.
Yeah.
And if we know that employees are feeling the same way, so basically almost everybody in your organization doesn't really want to be there.
We've seen so much research.
Yikes.
I mean, we've got that massive piece of Gallup research from last year that said, the cost of disengaged employees. And again, they put that figure at 70% of employees were disengaged, was $10.3 billion to the UAE economy alone.
It's massive.
That's the cost to business, which we can quantify in all different ways. What is the ROI of embracing why does happiness matter to the P&L?
Yeah. So I think, defining happiness, again, there's many different ways to define that, but a workplace where people want to be, where leaders want to be, where people are doing good work. I mean, we know that there's, less absenteeism, less presenteeism, less turnover, but there's also higher profits as well, higher productivity, and there's lots of different reports and stats on this and numbers like that is easily available. So I think it's making the business case. You stand to make more money. You also stand to lose less money. But wouldn't it also just be nice to walk into a place where people say good morning and actually mean it and everybody's happy to be there, right? Like just qualitatively.
Okay, so
that shouldn't be hard to do.
I mean, look, we talk about reports at Mentl all the time. Like there was a study of studies, 100 different studies, and they came back with a 327% ROI on investing in the well-being of their teams. So, make more money, lose less money, and it's a nice place to be. Doesn't seem like a hard sell.
No.
Why is it?
Because it's hard to do. It's very hard to do.
So in your experience, how do organizations start doing?
So there's two different ways. One way is less effective than the other, but it seems to be the more popular route.
Okay.
But the more effective route is starting from the top, working your way down.
Okay.
What most organizations do is start from the bottom with the intention of working their way up, but never quite get there. It just kind of like stalls and then, right. So what does it mean? Working from the top down is that we always talk about leadership buy-in. I hate that word because buy-in to me is signing a check and then that ends there. I actually don't think that's enough. But also research would suggest it is not enough. So a beautiful study by Jessica Grossmeyer that we've talked about before, published in 2020, looked at 4 different factors. So leadership support, program comprehensiveness, so basically how good is the program you're offering, program integration, is it plugged into community referrals, existing EAP, other, diversity and inclusion, all these ESG even, and then the 4th one was incentives. Out of these 4 factors, which has the biggest impact on whether people participate in well-being programming initiatives, whatever it is you're going to do, the impact it has on health, and there was one other thing. Anyway, those 2 are big enough. Oh, perceptions of support. So do employees perceive that you care about them?
Yeah.
And out of those 4, it was leadership support was the biggest one. So leadership support, again, doesn't mean sign the check. It means, are you attending well-being classes? Are you modeling and saying, hey, let's go for a walk? Let's have our meeting outside. How's that meeting going this week on optimism? Tell me about it.
Yeah.
I heard that. Here's what I think about it. Here's what I tried this week. What about you? Hey, what time are those sessions on Thursday? Okay, y'all are going to be there, right? Excellent. So really setting the expectation that this matters. It's something that we do. It's something that leadership does, and they actively talk about it, model it, ask about it, reinforce it, build it into KPIs, build in a system accountability, and expect that people are going to do it. And also deal with people who don't. which also takes courage.
Building accountability. Yeah. I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
I just want to stay with the individual leaders for a minute.
Yeah.
Because, there was a great piece of McKinsey research, which was about the 10 strategies, factors, important considerations that leaders needed to thrive over the next 10 years. 6 of them were linked to emotional intelligence. And one of them very specifically, when you as the CEO of a company need to go on your own emotional journey. You need to get in touch with, again, positive psychology. You need to get in touch with your emotions. You need to learn this stuff rather than be this repressed individual. This modeling of positive psychology, this modeling of a better culture inside of an organization, why is that actually good for the leader?
Because it allows them to also be well. So if you're able to be...
Is that contractually allowed?
But I think it allows them to be well also, because again, if we come back to 70% of the leaders are like, I don't really want to be here, something's not working for them as well.
Yeah.
So this old style of leadership where you must be hard and harsh and rigid and work 18 hours, frankly.
And can never be wrong about anything and right about everything. Yeah.
This is a hard way to go.
Yeah.
So it's just an easier way to do work, but you too will be more successful in your role. And it's just easier to say, you know what, I don't know, what do you think? You don't have to have all the answers.
It seems like, and again, we see the statistics around, particularly males, around that 40 to 50-year-old, all the pressure is kind of caving in on them. Like, again, on that flip side, it's lonely at the top. It's a classic phrase, but we know the science is now telling us just how bad loneliness and isolation is for our physical health.
It's as bad as smoking.
14 cigarettes a day, I think the US Surgeon General said.
Yeah.
So it seems equally important to a leader's physical health in their own life, as well as the financial health of their business.
The two are tied, absolutely.
You came back to the 70%. And with managers, and that really gelled with a statistic. You were at the launch. You helped launch Cigna's new Vitality report, which is an evolution of their annual well-being survey. One of the statistics that really stood out to me was, okay, so 70% of employees, around 70% of employees, thinking, yeah, my boss kind of they do recognize our mental health, but at the same time, 66% of them, 2/3, were saying our company still prioritizes productivity over well-being. And
this is where I come back to, I'd made the comment earlier about what do we mean about happiness? What do we mean about well-being? So I think there's still a view that well-being is yoga and stretching and go run on the treadmill. And I think we need to expand and deepen that definition to well-being is about social relationships. It's about how we treat people. It's about how we feel about our own mental health and how we function, not only at work, but in other spheres of our life. Because if you're having problems at home, that comes to work. If you're having problems at work, it goes home. So, it's everywhere.
Yeah, totally.
And we need to be, I think, more understanding of what well-being actually means, and it's not just the physical side. And I think if we could deepen that understanding and start having those conversations, how do people actually feel here? How do people feel under your leadership? How do people feel under their manager's care or supervision, whatever we want to call it? I think now we can start having these honest conversations rather than measuring your BMI and saying this is what you need.
I don't want anyone measuring my BMI right now after Christmas. We're all on a journey. It's a journey. It's a journey, mentally and physically.
That's not really what the issue is.
That kind of feels like we actually need to get to almost like to a workplace definition. The World Health Organization has its own definition of what mental health is, or we look at Sustainable Development Goals about what mental health is. We don't have that in the workplace. We don't go in and go, right, well, in your contract, this is what, this is the social contract with us. That culture aspect doesn't really sit in many contracts.
And wouldn't it be nice to include it?
Wouldn't it? Yeah. You'd feel a lot better signing on the dotted line. Working with organizations, what have you seen that works well? What have you seen that's been done well? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so I think, again, it's starting from the top. So we talked about Cigna earlier.
Yeah.
Let's use them. And, will Jerome mind us talking about him? But,
absolutely not.
I made a comment the other day when I met him at the meeting. The man just comes over every time and says, "Hi, good morning. How are you? And how's life going?" And no distinction between you're an employee, you're mid-level, you're low, you're nobody. So it's presence, it's mindset, it's, again, how we treat people. So leading by example. He also started the launch saying, here's what I'm doing for my well-being. Leanne did the exact same thing. So I think it's really talking and leading the change you want to see. If you want people to be well, give them the space to talk about being well and give them the terminology and the words to be able to talk about being well. So leading by example, this is a big one. Lots of organizations now are focusing on those managers because they know, again, they drive 70% of well-being.
Yeah.
So if you want to focus on employee well-being, ignore your employees for a while, deal with their managers, because that 70% impact, that's actually more than employees have over their own well-being at work. Yeah. So a lot of the training around there is looking at how do we build high-quality connections. So again, building trust, fixing bad relationships, being able to have awkward conversations, nurturing, putting people on the pedestal, elevating people, including these ideas of servant leadership. Yeah. I know you have a busy week. How can I help you?
Yeah.
Versus,
which I love.
What are you going to do for me this week? Right? So it's really just turning the tables around. What does it also mean to be a good manager? So I was just reading an article this morning, Harvard Business Review, talking about new management skills are really about collaboration, being the basketball coach and not the army commander.
Yeah.
So part of it is also redefining roles. And again, coming back to that job description, what do we want people to do here? So we expect you to take care of your physical health, mental health. We'll help you do it. We will also provide you with a great manager who's going to care for you, ask about your mental health, your physical health, ask about your interests, be able to, help you grow in your role, help you grow in your profession overall, because you may leave one day and that's okay. We know you will. But until then, we want you to be at your best. So lots of things. I think it's redefining what does a good workplace look like and what does that mean?
Where do you think we're at on this journey?
I think we're just beginning.
I was going to say, if you look at, I think COVID almost like restarted the engine on this whole conversation.
Yeah.
But how much progress have we made over the last 5 years? And where do you think we need to get to in the next 5 years?
I think the progress we've made is everybody talks about well-being. Whereas 5 years ago, we didn't talk about it. It wasn't even a word. People would just laugh at you. Well-being, whatever, what
Woo-hoo.
A joke.
Yeah,
woohoo, exactly. So now it's a thing. We talk about mental health at work, thanks in part to this initiative and others like it. And I think we're starting to move up the chain of command, if you will, to look at what is the responsibility of others in the social contract, so it's not always falling on the responsibility on employees alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fruitful conversation and a productive conversation, and that's where the impact is going to be.
Let's talk risk versus reward. What is the risk to companies that cling to the old ways, to cling to the hierarchy of
People
fear?
are going to vote with their feet. And people, I'm watching in certain places, but even just anecdotally, or just on LinkedIn, the amount of discontent is pretty high.
Yeah.
And the amount of people quitting their jobs saying, I'm out. I don't want to work like this anymore.
Again, Leanne, she was on the podcast as well, Leanne from Cigna.
Okay.
And one of the vitality research report figures was 2/3 of people are now actively considering taking a lower paid job to be able to spend more time with their family because they've not got that flexibility has not been built in there.
And just to be treated well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's risk.
Yeah.
What's the reward for those, not first movers, because we do have some companies that are already, setting the pace, but for anyone listening or watching today and going, do you know what, we'll start, let's try this. What do you see as the reward?
Well, I think it's investing in people. So people are suddenly like, whoa, right? They're growing under your care. They will be more loyal. They'll be more innovative, more creative, more productive, more performing, right? So your profit, you're going to gain from that. But I also think from an employee value proposition, you're going to be able to retain and recruit talent, of your choice. And just in terms of reputation, everybody wants to be that great company to work for. I mean, I can name a few where I'm like, give my left arm to work there, like, wow, right? And others, I'm like, yeah, no, you can pay me enough to go work there.
Final question. You've been very generous with your time. What gives you hope? Is 2024 going to be the year of mental health and well-being in the workplace?
I think we're just starting.
Okay.
We're on the journey. I'm optimistic about that.
Okay.
The door has opened.
Yeah.
And I think there is a path ahead. I'd like it to move faster, of course, but we're on the path.
Addendum to that. I mean, it was interesting that we saw what the government has been doing recently here in the UAE. And I feel like the government have really set out their stand and go, we want to be one of the happiest places on the planet. And we saw yesterday a new flexible working legislation for the public sector.
Perfect.
Last week, Sheikh Mohammed, the president of the UAE, was supporting and advocating for family-friendly policies in workplaces, saying how important it was to support parents in workplaces. We've had a new mental health law that destigmatizes mental health, or that's one of its goals, and also makes it illegal for employees to discriminate. Sorry, I had a glass of wine last night as well. Okay. Discriminate against people with mental health conditions. So it seems like the direction of travel, as far as
we're on
the
right
leadership,
path. Absolutely,
is there.
Yeah.
What's the responsibility of the private sector to help them actually deliver that if we're going to have a great society?
Yeah. And I think we are catching up, and I think it will catch up, and there are lots of organizations doing amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Again, it's just we need all of them to be doing it.
Yeah. That feels like a mic drop moment.
Yeah. We can do that, right?
We can do that.
Totally.
We're optimistic.
We're optimistic.
We're positive.
We can do anything.
Yes, we can. Dr. Louise, thank you very much for your time on the Mental Space podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
Great, thank you.
If you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, please remember that you can subscribe to us. It really helps us attract more and more amazing guests to the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, the button's right there. Click subscribe. And remember, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, we're everywhere. Please come and visit mental.space and check out the show notes. We'll link you to HappinessMatters.org. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much.